So David, it was actually great to see that film that Mindy Steiner did in 2012. I hadn't seen it for a while. And I thought that was a great way to kind of introduce who you are, because you really talk about your whole history. So maybe we don't have to do that now. But I would like to sort of maybe begin by talking about you and my relationship, if that'll work for you. Is there anything you want to say about the film at this point?
No.
Okay. Well, I won't go into a whole bunch of detail, but I am the co-author of a book called Harlem of the West, and one of the cogent facts is that David is the last living photographer who has work in that book, and that book is actually about the history of the jazz era in the Fillmore district in San Francisco, a place where David had a studio after he came to San Francisco, as you saw in the film, to study with Ansel Adams. And what was great is a number of people, my friend Susan Schwarzenberg and a number of people told me that I should look up David's work when we were doing research. And when we found him, what I really loved about your work was a lot of the photographers were people that made their living photographing in the clubs. And you were actually an artist, and you had photographs of life on the street. And that was an incredible addition to both the book and to our knowledge of what was going on in this neighborhood, which had been erased from the history. Maybe talk a little bit more about your the studio that you opened after, because you talk a little bit about it in the film, but you had a studio on Divisadero for a while. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I have a great picture, which I think is from the Sun Reporter, of an ad, a really nice portrait. Yeah. It says, "Merry Christmas. It's only you can say it with your portrait." So you were drumming up business, and I'm sure you got a lot of business from that.
My wife at that time and our family were living in Hunters Point, okay? And I wanted to show my work and be more of the inner city part of San Francisco. That's where a lot of the photographs and the life of Blacks in San Francisco was more around the Fillmore. So I found the place on the Divisadero Street. The gentleman there had a shoe shop. He was moving away, and I approached him and asked if I could rent a studio. Place next door. He said yes. At that time, my family at that time, we lived in Hunters Point. I wanted to get in a little closer to where the action was. He said, "Yes, David, it's yours if you want it." So I rented this space there. It had been a shoe shop. I rented it with him, and what was nice about it, it was large enough that my family at that time could move in, because my wife at that time, we had not had as many children as we did later. It worked, and I was near Carlton Gould and the Sun Reporter, and it put me kind of more in the heart of the Fillmore in San Francisco.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly what year it was. Okay. But
this was after the Fillmore had started to be redeveloped, is that right?
That's right, that's right.
I wanted to talk to you about another photograph that was at one point was on the back cover of our book, and that's the picture looking south from, I think it's Sutter and Fillmore, and there's a streetcar on the street, and if you look in the distance, you see the Fillmore Auditorium, and next to that is the synagogue that was there at that point, and next to that was a church. And that photograph, taken I think was it late 40s, maybe early 50s. Too bad my co-author's not here, because she's better with dates. But I think that photograph really gives a sense of what Fillmore looked like before it was wiped out. And many of the same shops, or at least the storefronts, are still there. And that picture was taken from up in, did you do that from a window, or where were you? Do you remember where you were located?
I was at second floor maybe of the Bank of America.
Okay.
Bank of America right on Fillmore Street. And I had used that several times to photograph the heart of the Fillmore and looking up toward the more richer district.
You could do either way, yes, because that really was the demarcation point. I think Geary became so. And what's interesting about that is that was before Geary was sunk below the overpass, which was another thing that happened with redevelopment that killed a lot of the retail right in the immediate area.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. And I had done a number of photographs, and one of my books on the cover of that building. I go up on the second floor,
Right.
that building, and I could see some of the major little businesses was going on. Not necessarily businesses owned by people who lived in the Fillmore, but other outside vendors, drugstores, and the church over there, right in that area.
You can see that right in the photograph, which is great.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe a couple more I wanted to talk to you about. I know that there's a picture you did of Eartha Kitt, and it was celebrating, I think, wasn't it a reward for news boys who delivered the Sun Reporter? And there's one with a single person, and then there's one with a group of people. And the little boy in front of Eartha Kitt has to hide his face. He's so embarrassed that he's in front. But it's interesting, when you had a show at the Harvey Milk Center, I met Danny Duncan, who is the person on the far left, who was not a newsboy, but who was invited to be in the picture because he was already an entertainer. And the story he told was that he was invited to come, and he's still alive and has contributed to the book recently, and is also working on a musical about the Fillmore that I think will be coming up, and I'll have to tell you about it when it comes out.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
And I like the fact that the book really tells your story about coming here from Jacksonville and being in the Navy. So, but there's something about maybe what you're doing now. I know you're still making pictures, aren't you? Aren't you photographing?
I'm making pictures.
Yes.
I'm going to get to that part that my wife will probably appreciate.
Okay.
The lady that I later married while I was going to school, after I got back here, became my spouse, okay? And I wasn't making that much money snapping pictures on the Fillmore. So I applied for a job with the Postal Service, okay? Lincoln Annex down there. So I got a job now, and I'm not relying just on the photography. I wouldn't make enough money. I had built a family, okay? The kids are all grown up by now, but it was that foundation that helped me, solidify my life. I'm not just around snapping pictures, okay? And the lady I married was a very good friend of the lady who I'm presently married with, and she has been substantially supportive of the book and that sort of thing. We were all friends once upon a time. That earlier wife that died, and the lady I'm married to now is now my wife. She's the author of the book. And it isn't that we just knew each other. Our friendship goes way back in terms of what I was interested in. We were involved in the same church at that time. So what I'm trying to express is I tried to solidify my life. I knew what I wanted to do with my work, and my decisions that I made complemented that. During that time, when I was learning to be a photographer, later on when I was taking photographs in San Francisco, as well as getting involved with the NAACP, being the first march on Washington, I happened to have been there. I was invited there by the local NAACP. And subsequent to that time, which was some time ago, I get invitations when something important is happening around that event that happened. My wife and I went, my current wife and I went back to Washington, D.C. And a lot of positive grew out of that. I'm telling my life to you now. The lady who said, I'll be your wife. My husband has passed. Your wife is gone. What do you say? What can I say? Of course. She did the book on me. A Dream Begun So Long Ago. Have you read the book?
I have. And we'll hold it up. Gene, do you have anything you want to ask at this point?
Yeah, I'm curious about the actual time you were studying with Ansel Adams and what that might have been like. That period of time is very interesting to me, and so I'm curious about it.
My training as a photographer, my experience with Ansel Adams and getting to know many of my colleagues and all, meant well to me if I'm going to continue to live in California. I had no idea that I would return to Jacksonville, Florida, and open my own studio. That was not my intention. My intention was to do what I did, stay at home and build my life here. Worked my job in the post office, did my photography with the people who lived in the neighborhood, as well as do my work documenting in the Fillmore district. Not on purpose, but there was something about the Fillmore and its population and where they came from had an appeal to me. And I got to know these big people and I got to photograph them.